I've been in conversation for a few weeks now, and a lot of that conversation is a conversation about the future or the way it is today. Part of my training, in fact, when you said terminology, a lot of my background started in 1978 with Unity when I walked into a seminar given by Catherine Ponder in Birmingham, Alabama. We were living in Montgomery, Alabama at the time. And then after that introduction, I was part of a sales organization that was covering Alabama, Mississippi, those areas. And I drove in a car with a friend from Montgomery, Alabama to Mobile, Alabama. And in that process, he played tapes of Catherine Ponder. So I was absorbed for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours in the conversation that had started. And it was like, this can't be true, okay? And it was something I was looking for, because a lot of you know I was brought up in a more fundamentalist organization. And the idea of guilt and sin was beat into my head, if I could use that terminology, but you understand what I'm saying. But to understand that God is love and only love, and that there isn't anything else, is a big step from that level up to a level that all is God, all is love. And that's kind of like the ideas I'd like to share with you today. What I've been looking at is what works. There's thousands and thousands of people out there looking for something that works. Anybody ever tried something that didn't work? It's like this strategy, or and truthfully, Madeline and I have spent lots and lots of money on the latest self-development seminars. We've been through EST, and we went through this, and we went through that. Still do it, still read. Just bought 2 or 3 more books this week. But the idea behind it is we're always looking for the next step. What's the answer? And what I'd like to share with you is I'm starting to really, really get that the answer is already there. And the answer is us. Okay? I go back to that famous Pogo cartoon, I have met the enemy and then it's us. Which means we are the expression of God. Now, I've been trying to figure this one out. Where does the ego fit in? Where does all this stuff fit in? And I've been doing some reading. Course of Love has helped me this week, some other things. And in looking at it, the ego. Everybody talks about the ego, but what is the ego? Where did it come from and how did we get it? It's not like a disease that we caught, okay? And then we can shovel in antibiotics and get rid of it. So it seems to be with us, it's attached to us, and what is it? And I realized with some work from the Course of Love this week, and then the Course of Miracles on Saturday, that the ego is a tool that we have created to separate ourselves from God. Okay? Now, we are talking. Let me go back a little bit. We got involved with the Joel Goldsmith conversations a number of years ago, and that was actually part of my ordination in the original church we were part of. And that church was based upon the teachings of Joel Goldsmith. And Joel Goldsmith was a healer. At one point in his life, he used to get letters in the mail asking for healings, and he would write them back, and they would get healings through his consciousness. There's a story 1 month that he was busy out of the country. He received 20 or 30,000 letters in the mail asking for healings, and he didn't get to them for 2 or 3 months. And people started writing in, thanking him for the healings. Do you get that? What that means is his consciousness was so strong that when we connected with it, we experienced a higher level of frequency vibration, which led to healings. So that was kind of like my background, Madeline's background. And Joel always talked about the physical, the metaphysical, and the spiritual. So if we're working on the mental level, which is controlling the mind, and the metaphysical, which is using affirmations, there's another level called spiritual level. And like anything else, anybody familiar with the trickle down idea? That if you work here, it trickles down into the rest of your life. So in looking at it, that's what I realized that we're looking at now. What are we? Who are we? Do you ever notice when somebody asks you who we are? In other words, who are you? Where do you go immediately? you go immediately to who you are in your awareness, which is your history. You know, I'm in my 70s. I'm married. We go to the physical things that have happened in our life, and that's who we are. And that is the ego telling us who we are. Everybody there? So who you are is really a child of God, but we cannot handle that. So the ego is a tool that the self, small s, created, I believe, to justify our separation from God, and for God's sake, don't let us know who we really are. Okay? Now, if you stop and think about it, what is the effect of that? Now, would anybody agree there's different groups in the world? I mean, just here in the Austin area, we got the people that live in Austin, people that live in Pflugerville, people that live in Roundrock. And God help you if you whatever. We can't even get the name of the church straightened out because people in Austin don't want to call it Unity Center Pflugerville, and people in Pflugerville don't want to call it Unity Center Austin. Yes?
Yeah.
So we are all lining up with groups. And we have this self-identification of who we are based upon the physical world. And who created the physical world? Us. Through our thinking. So the ego has set us up to be separate. And it's because the whole thing doesn't make sense. If we really are an expression of God, then we can change things. But the ego doesn't want us to know that. It wants to keep us separate. Okay, so that's why we have male and female separation, yes. And age separation. You know, those old fogies don't know what youngies want, vice versa. Those young kids, they want to do this and do that. Okay, and then we've got racial groups. Okay, and we all congregate together. We even live in the same locations in the same cities. Yes? Okay? And then we have gender. Well, what gender? Oh my goodness, we have all kinds of gender groups today. But I have, if somebody is that way, my goodness, I can't be that way. And see, we have all these groups that we have created here. It's really just a perception, that's all it is. So the ego's job is a tool to keep us separate. Okay? Now, that whole idea is so deeply ingrained within us that we don't know it's there. We just like somebody, boy, I like him. Well, I wonder what it is that I like him about. Okay? And we don't stop to think about it. Okay? We really don't. And of course, somebody that isn't like me, oh my God, I can't go there. So we have all of these groups that we are in. And that's, I believe, the job of the ego. And the problem is it's so deeply ingrained and there's so many different things going on here. I understand, I'm told we have, I forget, 80,000 thoughts a minute.
Oh, Lord.
At the unconscious level, and we can handle 1,000. Okay? So all that's going on behind the scenes in what we call unconscious is unconscious. And so we develop this whole persona about life. Here I am. And the ego keeps saying, yeah, man, they are separate again. So there's this constant, it's a war, really. Because deep down inside, we know that that's not true. But we can't acknowledge it, because if we acknowledge it, then all those people I don't like are now, I have to like them. In a way, okay? So it's real. Did you see the setup? The setup's crazy. And it's what's true. I happened to spend just about 10 minutes. Now, truth, everybody, we set up here in the morning, and the quest class starts, and I go down to McDonald's for breakfast. So I was sitting there eating my sausage and egg burrito, coffee, and the TV was on, and I was watching Mr. Trump in Saudi Arabia. And it's real interesting to me because he was spelling out all the different groups. I never realized there were so many different groups in the Mideast. Because they got the Sunnis and the Sunnis and the Shiites, and they've got this and that, and all these terror groups and that. And it was like, oh, that's what I'm going to talk about. But we've got our own terror groups here. Yes?
Yes.
You mean here?
Yeah. Okay? You know what those folks are like, you know. Oh, my God. You know, how can I invite a homosexual to dinner? It's nuts. It's crazy how we compartmentalize ourselves, okay? So love is the answer, but where is love? That's here, okay? So in my notes, and I'm going to refer here, the self has to make be so strong to keep us away from the whole idea of who we are. So the Bible and spiritual literature tells us we're children of God. Now let me take it a step further. You are an expression of God, which means what? You are God. And that we can't handle that. That's too much. For goodness sakes, folks, Jesus the Christ was crucified because he said that. Or he didn't deny it. And I'm sitting here and we're sitting here discussing the possibility that God flows through us. And we are that God everybody talks about. It's not out there. Yes, it's in here. And the acknowledgement of that is so dramatic that we can't go there. Or it's possible that we can't go there. So we have to make up a story. And the story is everybody did it to me. And that's the ultimate victimhood, okay, that says, well, it's not my fault, it's your fault, which is called projection in the psychological world. So we've got a situation where we have met the enemy and then it's us. In other words, we have created our world the way it is, and it's not up to anybody else to change it. You know, I laughingly, Madeline and I talk a lot, and I have to say I forgive you, but actually I have to forgive myself. My daughters remind me that I said okay 48 years ago. Okay, so who created the issues in my life? Robert did. Don't tell him.
Y'all listen to the podcast.
They do listen to the podcast. It's funny. So, but you see, we have to create ourselves as a victim, and we're helpless. Okay.
I'm sorry, you're on a roll, and I don't want to disrupt you, but
I am on a roll.
the quest today was so perfect for what you're saying, because there was a story of a man who had all these problems, all this debt,
Yep.
all this insecurity, and all this trouble in his life. And he said, if only I could move to San Francisco, everything
Yes,
would be okay.
everything would be okay, right.
And so he kept saying that, he kept blaming his circumstances for everything that was going on in his life. And he got to San Francisco, and within 8 months, he had duplicated everything that he had left.
Yeah, it's like, you ever notice when you move, the next door neighbor moves with you?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good, but it's funny, it really is. And so we create our world. We literally create our world. So we've got this internal model of who we are and all the story. See, we create the story. And if I'm on the bed, if we really got open with each other, we could get your story out. And your story is, well, and we go through this story and keep playing over and over and over again. Okay, it's like watching the same movie over and over and over again. And I have to admit, that's been my life. Now, it did break a little bit when I moved to Austin. But you see, that's the truth about it. So, what is the model? If we're going to change things, and in the article I wrote this week, I was talking about Jim Blake. And Jim Blake is the CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries. And he said we need a new model. Because you can't change things from changing things. You can only change things by creating a new model. So you see, if you try to attack something to change it, all you do is reinforce it. Because you give it credibility when you attack it. Okay? So an idea that is a negative idea, I can say, I don't like it, and what I'm doing is putting a great big sign on it. Okay? So the idea is to create a new model of something that works. So my idea in thinking about it is, okay, we're a Christian organization. We base upon the Christian teachings of Jesus. So maybe we should look at the model that Jesus created, okay? Now, everybody looks at the miracles, everybody looks at the words, but how did Jesus live his day-to-day life? And how did the spiritual teachers, the ones that have made a difference, how do they live? What do they do? How do they play? How do they spend their extra time? What do they eat? Okay? So it's that everyday thing that I've been looking into, trying to figure out, okay, what have they done that we need to do in today's world? And it's really interesting. It really is. One of the things I noticed is, if you ever notice, Jesus talks about going into the closet. There's a lot of reference to going up on the mountain. I think there's 8 or 9 references in the New Testament to going to the mountain. Now, in understanding it from a metaphysical area, and I would like to say spiritual, because I'd like to bring the word spiritually, because we're talking spiritual ideas, and they are metaphysical, but they're at that next level, which is turning it over to God. See, I can use the powers of my mind to create something, but why do I do that when I can go up and create the model of the Christ and allow the Christ to manifest things in my life? But anyway, having said that, let me go here to mountain. And this is Charles Fillmore's work, known as The Revealing Word. My glasses are here somewhere. I'm still wearing them. I got new ones, though. Let me tell you. See? And it says, mountain. A mountain represents an exalted state of mind where the divine plan may be perceived. It also says, a high mountain to which personality carries us in our spiritual uplift is the consciousness of power over mortal thought. So it's the time of, you ready? Meditation, silence, shutting up, sitting down. Okay? And it goes on and says, going up into the mountain to pray means elevating our thoughts and our aspirations to the spiritual viewpoint. And the spiritual viewpoint is what? God. Because there isn't anything else. And I want to say, well, God is good, yeah, okay. Is there any reason to put anything, modifiers on God? See, the word God, or God, the essence of God, is perfect right now. So that's all I need to know is God. And so the question is, like a lot of let's say our sister churches use the term, what would Jesus do? And I'd like to think about, what would God want me to think? In other words, what's a God thought? So if I can learn to replace the ego's words of separation with the idea that God is running my thoughts, maybe that will overcome. But there's also that process of silence. Because it says, pray means elevating our thoughts and aspirations to the spiritual viewpoint, which means quieting the mind so that the ideas can come through. So, Jesus spent, as far as we can tell, spent hours in meditation. He went off into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. What do you think he did there? Build a campfire? Yeah, well, maybe, but he spent time in silence. And one of the ideas, and by the way, 40 days and 40 nights is no mystery. Certain numbers were used, like 144,000 was like we would say millions and millions. That there were euphemisms or phrases back then. And 40 days and 40 nights was a lot of time, which is another way of saying that. So he went off into the wilderness by himself for a while to pray, I believe, and to meditate. So he spent, I'm going to say, hours in meditation.
He wrestled with his demons.
Yeah, he did. And the demons are a metaphor for the ego thoughts. Okay? So we want to talk about the devil. The devil isn't true. The devil is the absence of God. Okay? So we're wrestling with God or the absence of God. It's a very interesting conversation. So, and going on, we can look at Charles Fillmore. And Charles Fillmore's personal life was very interesting. He raised a family. So he was involved in what we call more normal day-to-day stuff. He had to eat. He had a family, so he did other things. And so, but the word is, and it's in several of the books, that he spent sometimes 5, 6, 7 hours a day in silence. Okay? So there's another model. Now, I'm not saying 5, 6, 7 hours a day, but it's an inkling that maybe quiet time is important. Paramahansa Yogananda, if anybody here has read his book, he talks about as a teenager, he found a room up in the attic above his house, and he used to spend 3 or 4 hours. He'd go up, close the trap door, and sit in meditation for 3 or 4 hours. So a lot of spiritual teachers that have been, let's call it successful in a spiritual way, have brought meditation into their lives. And what is one of the most difficult things for us to do? Be quiet. Keep the mind quiet. You sit down for a minute and all of a sudden, boom, I gotta go do this. Or the phone, I swear, I create the phone ringing. And we do these things, yes? Now I have to come in and check with something the minute I go in, So all this stuff is her fault. But you see what we do, and it's all unconscious, and it's the ego is doing everything it can to keep us from going into silence. Why? Because it's the one thing that might make a difference in our lives. Okay?
Scared.
Yeah,
The
it's
ego.
terrifying. Okay? So it's interesting that this thing that is afraid, we don't want to go there because it keeps us stirred up. And it's easy to do that. So anyway, mountain. Everybody got that? That's a very, very important thing to understand. So let me go back here. The ultimate God of the ego is to keep us separate. And the only way it can keep us separate is keep us in victimhood and keep us separated in groups. So maybe part of that step is to start loving our neighbors as ourselves, which is another one of those commandments from Jesus. Love thy, shall love thy neighbor as thyself, which means, number one, you got to love yourself first. Okay? Everybody got that? See, that's the idea of separation. If I don't love myself, then I'm different, so I have to be separated. But the minute you start realizing you're a child of God, which is the big step in the enlightenment world, I start changing because I'm a child of God. Now, the meditation we're talking about, everybody understand, in looking at the complication of that, how many different modes and strategies and ideas are there in the meditation world? Well, there's hundreds. Okay? There are. And if you don't meditate this way, you don't do it right. And I'm the one, and see, again, we create separation in the idea of meditation. In this church, I woke up this week, and there's three main strategies or ideas in the meditation world here. Okay, we've got the Christian meditation, which goes back into the medieval times, Gregorian chants, but also the monastery and the monks being separated in the monastery. And that's the centering prayer that Pat brings in from Father Katie, who has brought it out into the public and published it as a means of meditation. There's the Zen Buddhism ideas of mindfulness and those ideas. And that's basically what Donald is. Look, Kelly comes out of that tradition. Okay? Madeline and I were trained in Kriya Yoga, which is Paramahansa Yogananda's lineage. Okay? And you know what? They all sound the same at some level. So we can create confusion even by the way we meditate. And does it matter? No. That's why Ann and I get a kick out of it. All you do is sit down, shut up, and be quiet. Now, are there things to help you? Yes, there are. But again, it's understanding that separation is in many of these things. And it's picking something that works for us to go into the silence and retain who we are. It's fascinating that, it's like, I tell people, and Madam, back it up, that we used to use I wrote hundreds and hundreds of affirmations. Remember the way the teachers in school used to say, I will not talk, and you had to write it? That's what I did for a long time. We did endless loop tapes. We would take a 12-minute tape, put affirmations on it, play it for 24 hours, even sleep with it. Those of you who have been to the residence, you hear music going all the time, yes? And all that music has subliminal stuff in it because it's always constant. But the key to the whole thing, I'm sure, is time and silence. Okay? So what is the new model? The new way is to let everything go and spend time in meditation. Now, if you take a look at what the church is teaching, what the community is teaching, and the services, Pat does meditation in Lectio Divina, which is using the Bible and the ancient tradition in an hour service. Okay. Friday night we open with just Father, we're open for a quick prayer, maybe 30 seconds. We sit quietly for a whole hour, okay? And then we end with the Lord's Prayer. Now, most people, that an hour's a lot to begin, it really is. So I say come 20 minutes if you want to. We had somebody come Friday night, spend a half an hour, and left. It's fine. Okay? And Donald on Sunday morning is taking his time and his effort because he's excited about Locke Kelly's work. And Locke Kelly's work comes from Zen Buddhism down through those ideas. So whichever way you feel, find one and do it. Okay? Everybody got that? And it's a model, what is the model we want? The model that the ego's creating for us, we're different. And we have to fight for everything we want. Do you ever notice when you have to push something, it gets worse? Mm-hmm. Okay? It's almost, it's amazing to us. So, I do want to read, got to get into the Course in Miracles a little bit anyway. So, and this was in Saturday's lesson that we were working with. It says, if you cannot hear the voice for God, it's because you do not choose to listen. See, the ego wants to keep us so busy that we can't hear the voice of God. But the voice of God is always there, always there. And it goes on and says that you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behavior. Yes, this is what you want. See, I wish I could change. Okay, start listening to the voice of spirit. Okay? Because the voice of ego is the thing that keeps us in the material world. Then it goes on over here. When you are sad, know that this need not be. So you don't have to be sad. Depression comes from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. So it's a difference between what you see and what you think you should see. Okay? And it goes on and says the sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. Remember that you are deprived of nothing except by your own decisions and then decide otherwise. So you're a child of God. You have created your life the way it is. God didn't do it. Your neighbor didn't do it. Your spouse didn't do it. I hate to admit that. But you see, we're upset because of something that's happening that we created. It's crazy. Then it goes on and says, when you're anxious, anybody ever anxious? Don't admit it. Okay? Realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego and know this need not be. In other words, your ego's trying to stir you. Did you ever notice when you relax, the ego says, oh, you got to go do that. Okay, up you go. Because the ego doesn't want you to be still and know God. Then it goes on, and know this, you can be as vigilant against the ego's dictates as for them. So you don't have to let the ego run you. When you feel guilty, and you better, no, nobody feels guilty in here, I know. Remember that the ego has indeed violated the laws of God, but you have not. You ready for this? Leave the sins of the ego to me, Christ. So you can turn it over. You're not guilty. You're a child of God, perfect and whole. And that's the model that we're talking about that you really are. So I guess I've gone on enough. We can do the whole book, but I'm not going to do that today.
But we can't, turn it all over all at once, right? It takes
time. It takes practice. It's like I tell people, how do you start working with your intuition? Start practicing. So you might turn one little thing over and see what happens. Or, Father, please take this. Before I come up, I ask a prayer, Father. It's not me, it's the Father within that does the work. Okay, so it's turning it over. And the idea behind it is try it. One of the tricks, if you're in a building with elevators, just take a wild guess when the elevator's going to show up. Okay, and if it works, fine. All you do is own that. Okay, and it takes time. But the step is doing it and realizing you're doing it for your own good. And see, the ego gives us all kinds of excuses. Okay, so I'm saying, we'll build a new model, okay, and look at the people who are the models we want to follow. Okay, I don't know about you, but Jesus Christ is a pretty good model. Charles Fillmore actually pretty good. Paramahansa and Yogananda works. Lots of, just pick somebody and find out what they have done to reach the level of awareness they have. Okay? And I also think we get lost in the metaphysical musings. We get all involved in, oh, I should do this, I should do that. But it's really simple, it's just letting go. All right. Anybody else? Okay, Course in Miracles. Thank you very much. And the church is being built. In the Thursday board meeting, I really got clear that we need a church building now. Okay? And if you stop and think about it, we talked about a serious sum of money, but how quickly could it be created? Not raised, not donated, created from the universe by all of us. Okay? Stop and think about that. And do we believe it? And I believe it, and I want you to believe it with me. Okay? Thank you. I love you. Yes?
And we're very grateful for the money that we have in the bank that we've already started,
Yeah.
and we're already well on our way.
The money is
We have
showing
money
up.
in the
It
bank.
really is.
It's showing up, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's coming in.
Magical ways.
Anybody else? Thank you, Valerie.
I have something I'd just like to share with the group very quickly. Most of you know that I have two daughters who have had a very rough path that they walked in their life. From 15 to ages 49 and 50, they have been on a horrific path of what we say is horrific drugs. Today, those girls are healing and happy
Good.
and healthy, and they know that God is in them. And this has just come about in the last 4 or 5 months for both of them to be right there. I can see God right there so brightly, as
That's a
I
miracle.
always knew was there. So I thank you for your prayers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. That's
Can't wait till
amazing.
you meet them.
Thank you. Anybody else? By the way, once in a while, we need to share miracles. We really do. You know, healings, life changes, things that happen. So if any time you have them, we'd love to hear about them. We really would. To me, everything that's happening is a miracle right now. It really is. Okay. Next.